Yule, it's your host, Gabe Morales. Speaking of Q-Wall, how many of you guys remember an old lowrider magazine called Q-Wall? It wasn't as big as the lowrider magazine or even some of the other ones that came out, but I remember it had some female ramflas in it and some good-looking hyenas. Anyways, just thought I'd bring that up for any of you veteranos. So today, we are going to cover the Q last names, as in Q-Wall, and also get into a few of the R last names, as in Ramfla. I'll start off with Raymond Ramman Quevedo, who's from Coachella. He had a K number, 73730, and I believe was made MA sometime in the 1990s and was housed at Pelican Bay for many years. He then was housed at North Kern State Prison in 2012, and I lost track of him after that. There's Anthony Gizmo Quinones. This guy's kind of interesting. I know he did time in the feds. I'm not sure about CDC, but he had a BOP number of 21291-112. He was born in 1959 and has been seen in several pictures with Carnales. It was obvious to tell it was him because he had a giant war shield tattoo on his throat. He also had a black hand on his chest. He did time at Big Sandy and was just recently released in May of 2023. There was a Bob Steele Quinones from State Street. He had an A number, 59742, and was born in 1936. He was made MA in the early 1960s, and I remember hearing about this guy throughout the 1970s from my mentor, Robert Mocha-Morrill. He was at Tehachapi in 1971 through the mid-70s and then was released. He committed multiple robberies in the late 70s, including bank robberies, and went to the BOP. I understand he died of liver problems, probably due to drug and alcohol abuse in 2005. I dealt with a Jose Luis Silent Quintana from Harpies. I remember this guy very clearly because he killed 3 18th Streeters. This is part of that drama that happened behind the war between 18th Street and Harpies that involved original 18th Street member Rocky Glover, who then came back and shot up an apartment where he believed Harpies were, but actually killed innocent civilians. He hit CDC in early 1982, and then I dealt with him at New Folsom in 1990. Silent was a good name for him. He was pretty low-key. He then went to Calipatria and has been housed at Richard J. Donovan for at least the last few years. There's Manuel Snuffy Quintero, who I mentioned was part of the plot to kill Donald Littleman Ortiz. And it has already been in the press, so I don't think I'm putting anything out there that's extremely sensitive. But it sounds like, according to the press, that he would have been the sponsor of Cesar Palomino, the trigger man, in that 187. There's Mark Turtle Quiros out of Colton. He had a C number, 50887, and was born in 1963. He was made MA by the 1990s and did a lot of years at Pelican Bay, and I believe has some control over some areas in the IE. He has been housed at Centinela State Prison for quite a few years now. There was a John Charlie Brown Rabaca, who was from Wilmas. I believe he had a B number, but I'm not sure what that was. I do have a date of birth, however, and that was September 30th, 1946. He was MA in the 1970s and was at CIM Reception Center in 1977 when he murdered an NF member by the name of William Gonzalez in May of that year. Assisting him was Kilroy Roybal, who I will talk about in more detail soon. There was a Jose Roberto Ramirez from Orange County, I believe Santa Anita. He had a J number, 51271, and was made MA, I believe, around 2000. He was housed at Corcoran in 2004 and then moved to Wasco State Prison in 2012 and has recently been housed at Richard J. Donovan. There was Mike Little Frencho Ramirez from Norwalk. He had a B number, 51961, and he was another one who was involved in a hit on the North Familia. But this hit took place at DVI in November of 1975, and I'm not sure what happened to him after that. There's Paul Barry Shorty Ramirez from El Sereno. He had a C number, 16882, and I was a rep at the LA County Jail in the 1990s. He was housed at Lancaster in 2012, and I show is no longer in custody. There's a Richard Torito Ramirez from Vista, which is located in San Diego County. He had an H number, 60305. And he also did some federal time on BOP number 71488-198. He was housed at Lewisburg in 2003 and I understand held the keys at Atwater in 2008. He did some time with Perico Rocha and Willie Bobo Giovea, as seen here in this picture. And I show was released in August 2016. Then we have Robert Black Bobby Ramirez from Cantaranos. He was a very well-respected MMA member, as seen in multiple pictures, and is seen here on the cover of my Mexican Mafia book. He had a BOP number of 17160-148 and was born in 1949. Black Bobby did time with the Canales at Lompoc in 1978 when that was an MA stronghold. On November 11th, 1978, Black Bobby Champrenoso from Hazard and Willie Boy Giovea from Redondo Beach were found to be involved in the execution of a fellow carnal, Camos Hapo Trejo from Eastside Clover. They were all convicted in March 1981. He was housed at Lewisburg in 2005 when he was transferred to Victorville in that year. And Black Bobby continued to be well respected in the BOP until he died of natural causes at Victorville in July 2005. There was Rosalio Chago Ramirez from Florencia. He had a D number, 88469, and I understand was made MA in the 1980s, but ran afoul of Cuate Grajeda, who killed him in 1988. There was Arnulfo Drifter Ramos, who was from somewhere in Los. He had an H number, 65629, which he caught due to a murder beef committed in 1991. I understand he was made MA in the 1990s and sent to Pelican Bay in 1993. He did time at Tehachapi in 1996. He was housed at Calipatria in 2012, and I lost track of him after that. There was Leonard Lobster Rangel from Riverside. He had a K number, 26398, and was born in 1962. I understand he was made MA around the mid-1990s and had a girlfriend who was employed with the Riverside County Sheriff's Office. He was housed at Corcoran in 2012, and then I lost track of him after that. There was Albert Sergio Joker Rapallo. I show he was related to the Gudinos, and I believe was from Eastside Clover. He caught an assault with a deadly weapon in 1974 and then was released and got popped on a robbery in 1976. He was sent to CIM in 1979, whereby he was assigned C number 8070. He did some time at Folsom in the early 80s and then paroled in 1983, whereby he soon was arrested for a bank robbery and was given BOP number 78237-012. He did some time at Lompoc as well as Sheridan, which is a prison in Oregon, and I show was released in 1997. There was a Miguel Littleman Reed from Boyle Heights. He had a G number, 51882, and I show was documented as being MA at Corcoran in 2016. However, I lost track of him after that. There was a Bernardo Downer Renteria from 18th Street. He had a P number, 30327, and I show hit CDC in 1999. He was housed at Corcoran in 2016 and was at Ironwood State Prison in 2021, but I show is currently not in custody. There was a Jose Demon Renteria from Playboys. He had an H number, 48303. And hit CDC in 1992. He elevated to MA status and was housed at Corcoran in 2016 through 2021 and is currently housed at Ironwood State Prison. There was a Ricardo Baby Boy Resendez from Compton, Barrio 155s. He had a B number, 37776, and was born in 1953. He was MA in the early 1970s and was involved in a hit on an NF member with the name of Gonzalo Lopez at DVI. It sounds to me like this was an unsuccessful attempt, but I show that Lopez was killed in December 1974 by MM members, including Resendez. I understand he was also involved in some other murders, but fell out of favor. And I understand overdosed when he allegedly was given a hot shot in 1980 on the orders of Kilroy Roybal. There was Abraham Abi Reyes from Fort Maravilla. He had an A number, 78375, and had a date of birth of 1939. He was one of the original MA members, but left the MA in the early 1960s, I understand without repercussions, and I believe paroled in the early 1970s. There's a Gabriel Bebo Reyes from Hawaiian Gardens. He had a C number, 88996. And was born in 1966 and was housed at Pelican Bay, but has been housed at New Folsom State Prison for many years now. There was a George Reyes from Corona. He had a B number, 9171, and was documented as being MA in the early 1980s. He then was released and came back with a D number, 15279, but I lost track of him after the mid-90s. There's a Gerardo, a.k.a. Cat/Gato Reyes, from LA. I'm not sure if he did any CDC time, but I have a BOP number of 43834-008. He was documented as being MA at Victorville in 2004, but I show was released a little over a year ago in June of 2022. There was Graciano Chano Reyes from Bolen Parque. He had an H number, 94781, and I believe was made MA in the late 1990s. He was housed at Corcoran 2016 through 2021 and is currently housed at High Desert State Prison. There's a Steve Shady Reyes from San Gabriel Valley, and I believe was documented as being MA around 1996. He committed a robbery in 1987 and then caught a parole violation in 1988 under CDC number D78787. He paroled in 1989, came back in another violation, and was basically in and out for several years. He finally got popped a new robbery charge and was given K number 22026, and I am unsure of his current status. And finally, we have Adolf Champ Reynoso, who actually is from Denver. Yes, that's where he grew up. He used to shine shoes in downtown Denver as a boy, in and around downtown bars. He then moved with his family out to Los Angeles, whereby they moved into the Ramona Gardens housing project, also known as Hazard. Champ became incarcerated in the early 1960s and is seen here with the Canales out on the yard at San Quentin in the mid-60s. He also did a lot of time at Folsom State Prison, as seen here, and ordered a hit on Pincushion Smith, which I covered in an early episode. Pincushion Smith was called that because he had been hit so many times that he looked like a pincushion, but they just couldn't kill this guy. He was also very good friends with Charles Manson, as seen here. Evidently, Pincushion had mouthed off to Reynoso, and while the hit was going down, Champ sung "You Belong to Me" out loud to cover up the noise of the attempted murder. The knife broke off in Smith's back, and he survived, just as he did many others. I had Pincushion Smith on my yard in the late 1980s, and yes, indeed, his body looked like Swiss cheese, full of deep scar holes. Champ was involved in an escape from Chino, California Institution for Men with Rocky Luna in May of 1972, and Champ took off for Mexico. According to law enforcement sources, during the entire time that he was a fugitive, he was collecting regular paychecks as a ghost employee from an MA, a Mexican Mafia ran front. To help conduct business with the Cosa Nostra, Reynoso enlisted the help of a Primera Flats and MA member named Manuel Joker Rodriguez. Joker was involved with an MA program called League of United Citizens to Help Addicts, or Lucha. Previously, I had spoken about Colorado Arias being given a Cadillac by Jimmy the Weasel Fratiano. And according to Moco, that story was true, but somehow I believe that Cadillac ended up being transferred into the hands of Champ. I'm not sure what was going on there, but I do know that Champ and Joe were doing a lot of deals with the drug trafficking organizations down in Mexico. During the late 1970s, Reynoso committed multiple armed robberies, including one with Aryan Brotherhood member William Puppet McKinney, that took place in Thousand Oaks, California, that netted close to $40,000. Years later, in 1983, Puppet paid back a favor to Reynoso when he murdered inmate Greg Keffer in the BOP, who had allegedly cheated Reynoso during a drug transaction. People didn't burn Champ and get away with it. He was arrested in September of that year, but jumped bail and ended up being caught in Denver after his whereabouts were given up by his girlfriend, who was the subject of a lot of abuse by Champ. Common law wife, Linda Del Antonio, turned him into authorities. Linda met Champ when she was only 14 years old, and he manipulated her, used and abused her, even made her get a tattoo on her chest that said "Property of Champ." In the 1980s, the federal faction of the MA created a commission very similar to the Aryan Brotherhood Commission, and 3 people sat on it: Philip Blackie Segura, Willie Boy Giovea, and Champ Reynoso. It acted sort of as an MA Supreme Court, deciding all serious matters, including who is made and who is not made, who could live and who needed to die. When the U.S. Penitentiary ADX prison, also known as the Supermax, opened in November 1994, Reynoso was considered to be a prime candidate for being housed there. It was while he was housed at the ADX that Champ sanctioned the murder of longtime Emero Manuel Tati Torres, who was stomped to death in April 2005, the first time a murder took place at the ADX. His murder was pinned on MA member Richard Chuco Santiago, and he was assisted by a guy who went by Silvestre, a.k.a. Chicale Rivera. Champ's young protege, Manuel Cricket Jackson, also for Hazard, would often carry out Champ's orders on the streets and inside prisons. Until his death on November 21st, 2018, many prison gang experts consider Reynoso to be the #1 guy in the federal BOP. And so, I'll have to end it there with a banger. I'd like to remind you that I have no intention of glorifying any of these groups or individuals. They were legends in their own world. It is a cruel and vicious world, one that I hope that you never become a part of. But if you are involved in gangs, I'd like you to think about ceasing that lifestyle now. You might think there's no other way out, but I'd like you to never stop believing in hope, because miracles happen every day. I know quite a few individuals who have successfully got out of that lifestyle and been saved. Con milagros. And with that, this is Gabe Morales signing off for Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians. Open your eyes. I like to think